right, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Texas Transition Resources for Families. We are so glad that you are here. There will be a recording of this webinar made available on the SpedTex website. We put the link in the chat. That recording will be made available after it is made accessible. So we will allow a few business days to get that done and then post it on the SpedTex website. We're going to get started and introduce along the way as we go. I'm Gracie Whitley with SpedTex Special Education Information Center. We are a collaborative project between Texas Education Agency and Region 10 Education Service Center. Joining me from SpedTex today, Sarah Untersee, Katrina Mathis, along with Brian Wilson. And from TEA today, we have Dr. Leo Caleo, as well as our speaker, Elizabeth Danner, and you'll learn more information about her shortly. SpedTex is a special education information center. We help parents understand their rights and responsibilities under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and facilitate collaboration when there are concerns between the parent and the school district. We also serve as a resource for educators. We offer support to stakeholders via phone, email, or live chat on our website. And we also work with Partners Resource Network to bring to you webinars, and we also provide resources and information directly to you through the services we provide, as well as via our website. Today's webinar is hosted by SpedTex and Partners Resource Network. From Partners Resource Network, we have Christina Henning, Statewide Director, and we have Stephanie McLaughlin. She is the PRN Training Specialist. So I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie so that she can share information about Partners Resource Network.
Thank you, Gracie, and welcome. Partners Resource Network, or PRN, is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. PTIs are funded through the Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. Throughout Texas, we have 4 PTI projects. They are known as PACT, PATH, PEN, and TEAM. Our mission is to empower and support Texas families and individuals impacted by disabilities or special healthcare needs. We do this through a network of highly skilled, regionally located coordinators who are knowledgeable in local policies, services, and resources, as well as state and national guidelines. We provide training, information, and one-on-one assistance at no cost to Texas families and youth. We serve parents of children and youth with disabilities from birth to age 26, as well as youth self-advocates from ages 14 to 26. Thank you, Gracie.
Thank you. Now today's presentation, Texas Transition Resources for Families. Our presenter for today's webinar is Elizabeth Danner. Elizabeth is the State Transition Coordinator with the Texas Education Agency. She coordinates the Student-Centered Transitions Network, the statewide technical assistance network to promote effective transition planning from early to exit. Planning for adult life starts in early childhood and continues through the exit from public schools. Elizabeth's background includes working in public education for over 20 years. In that role, she has worked as a paraprofessional, as a teacher, as a professional development or training specialist, and as a consultant. Her professional focus continues to be connecting people with disabilities to careers, continued learning, and community beyond the high school years. So at this point, I am going to stop sharing and say welcome again to Elizabeth and turn it over to her.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And thanks so much to SpedTex and to PRN for inviting me to come here today to talk about transition, which I love to do. And welcome to everybody who joined today or who's watching the recording. I know that for today, we're really going to be kind of focusing on resources for families. And I know that there are a lot of people who are watching this who are professionals who work with families. And so you're going to get plenty of resources to use to support the families that you support in your work. So I'm going to share my screen And we are going to go to texastransition.org, which is the hub for all of the resources for the Student-Centered Transitions Network, all of the resources developed to support transition from this technical assistance network. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple of resources. We could certainly, with any website tour, we could certainly get lost in all of the resources. So I'm really going to zero in on a couple of key resources. We're going to start with the key critical resource. Every student, pardon me, every student, every supporter, every family member, every educator should know about the Texas Transition and Employment Guide. This was a resource that was required by some legislation several sessions ago, many sessions ago, several years ago. And what it's really designed to do is to outline what are the kind of core requirements and resources so that no matter where families go across Texas or where they're entering into the transition conversation, that they'll have a framework to begin that conversation or to have conversations with the school as they continue the exploring planning for transition beyond high school into adult life. And so students and families and supporters would have this guide. So the most recent version of this guide was published in 2021. And so you can see here that when you go to texastransition.org, I'm going to take you back through. So if you're on the main website, if you go to texastransition.org, I just clicked right here, Texas Transition and Employment Guide. And this takes you to, you have a little overview video that's about 24 minutes. That is designed for an educator audience, but anybody can watch that. If today's webinar is something that if this doesn't give you enough information, you might want to check that out because it gives some examples of using the guide with some example students. So that's available if you'd like a deeper dive into the guide. And I also want to point out that it's available in several languages. We're going to be looking at the English version in today's webinar. But I just kind of wanted to highlight that you have it available there. And there will be an ASL video version published soon. So that's going to be something to watch for. So keep coming back to this page where the guide is posted to see if any new versions are developed, you will find them there. So starts out with Pathways, the Texas Transition and Employment Guide to a Successful Life After High School for Students with Disabilities. So you just kind of see right there, the design is really, it's for an audience of students. And you'll start to see pretty quickly that we're building self-determination right into the design of this. So we see that the first chapter is called Transition Planning. What is in my IEP? My rights. What changes when I turn 18? So you just see that we're starting out right away with an understanding that students are going to be reading this to use to plan for their transition to adult life. And you also notice some things like the color coding and the icons and nice, clean design and style, that we want this to be as engaging as possible for students. Now, of course, we know that students in the 21st century don't speak PDF by nature, right? We know that probably social media and other avenues, videos, there are a lot more popular ways to consume information for students. But as far as the PDF that is the guide, as far as this resource, trying to make this as engaging as possible. Another thing to watch for on the Texas Transition website are some animated videos for students that are designed more for a student audience to talk about how to use the guide. So there will be some supplemental resources posted to help students engage with the guide. And all of that is with an eye toward helping students to, to be to really own this as their document. But for those of you who are maybe family members or supporters or professionals in the lives of students, you can just see that it just makes it nice and clean and clear, and you'll see these colors and icons repeated throughout the guide. So we have just kind of a welcome to your future, just some things to watch for in the guide. And then here in this additional resources, notice that we have sped text is highlighted here. And as Gracie mentioned, sped text is the place for all of the rights and responsibilities in special education. And so this keeps the guide clean from any kind of, it doesn't bog down into statutory references or any kind of specific legal references. It's all about, this is how you're going to want to plan for transition. And if you want to know more about why, what is this based on? What are some of the rules and what's the framework for that? You have sped text, you have legal framework, you have the TEA website. You can also speak with a special education administrator in your district to talk more about what transition planning looks like, and the local procedures for that. And also, there's also this request for feedback. So if you are going through this guide and you're thinking, this is pretty great, but what would really help is if, and you have a thought about that, please give that feedback, because this is revised periodically, and so that's according to statute. So so you can share your thoughts about what would be better, or any thoughts you have. All thoughts are welcome, because it's just kind of that continuous feedback process. So you have that information there. So I'm going to take us into the first chapter, and when you see this chapter, you're going to see the format for the next several chapters. And notice here, we saw these icons and colors on that table of contents. So now you know where you've landed. We're in that first chapter talking about transition planning. So we have a little bit of introductory text. So for those who are maybe you are a student, or you are supporting a student who is in elementary or middle school, and you're hearing about transition planning, but you're not, it's all brand new to you, a little bit of a framework for what that is. And then some acronyms. So as we start talking in our committee meetings about acronyms, as you start hearing those, you can have a little resource for understanding what those are referencing. And here we go again with some self-determination, asking the students, what are some ideas you have about your life after graduation? What do you think will be fun? What do you think might be difficult? So we land with just kind of a wide open, what do you see in your crystal ball? What is in your future? What would you like to have in your future? What are some things that you're maybe concerned about when you think about your future? And so just that's really what we're talking about with transition planning, right? Is just beginning to think about what do we want that life after graduation to look like? And then we'll get into the details about how do we get there. So this next page in the transition planning chapter is a helpful infographic. And what I'm going to do is make it a bit smaller so that you can see the whole page. So this is what to know about transition planning. And so within transition planning, of course, you're going to hear some terms like post-secondary goals, transition assessment. There are going to be some terms used, transition services, course of study, all of those kinds of things that this is sort of the landing place for if you're hearing these at ARD meetings, or if you're hearing these terms as part of transition planning, maybe in preparation for an ARD meeting or in developing an IEP. If you're hearing these terms, this is a great way to kind of understand what does that mean? What are they really talking about? And it's also, if you just look at those blue terms there with the icons, student and parent involvement, transition assessments, post-secondary goals, annual IEP goals, you can start to see that this is the critical components of transition planning. And the educators are going to know the requirements of what needs to be in the IEP, but it's really critical that we have student and family voice in this process. And so understanding some of those key components that we're going to be looking at. And the transfer of rights at age 18. In Texas, the age of majority, or the age that you become a legal adult, is age 18. And so we need to talk about what that means as part of transition planning for every student. And so, so this can be a helpful kind of a one-pager reference sheet for going to an ARD or for looking through an IEP or anything like that. And then next you see one student's story. So you see, how did transition planning help me? And so this is just designed to kind of give a sense of like, here's a student who is out there in the world, they have left public school and they made their way through transition planning, and they talk about how that worked for them. So we have several students in this, in the transition guide, kind of sharing their story and giving a sense of like, this is how it went for me, and hopefully every student will see pieces of themselves reflected in the student's story, right? So some way of connecting with the student. Another thing to watch for on the website are student videos of actual students who shared their transition planning story. That's going to be posted sometime this year. There will be actual students telling their story on video. So kind of taking it off of the page and talking about what transition planning looked like for them and where they are now. All right, so now another thing to watch for, and I'm going to make this larger again. Another thing to watch for are some repeated sections. My life, my voice, self-determination in that topic. So in this case, we're looking at transition planning, as we know from all of the things that tell us where we are in the guide. We've got at the bottom of the page, we have the chapter title, we've got the color, we've got the icons, we know exactly where we are. And so this one is talking about, if we're going to be thinking about increasing self-determination in transition planning, in this case, we're looking at all of those things that a student can do before their ARD meeting, during their ARD meeting, and after their ARD meeting. And notice that we're always asking, what feels right to you today? What would you like to be able to do next? The self-determination does not look one single way. It might look different for the same student from year to year, as far as their participation in the ARD meeting. It might look different for two students who have the same eligibility for special education, but very different life stories. And so we're not going to predetermine what self-determination looks like. We're going to just check in every time with a student and ask, where are you today? What would you like to be able to do next? And we can also notice we have these little check boxes here that we can check off if that's a skill they already have, right? And so we might think about participating in transition assessments, asking who will be attending their ARD meeting and what will be discussed, inviting someone to come with them. That could be a friend, it could be anybody that they like to come with them. And if a student cannot attend for any reason, asking someone who will be there to share their thoughts with their ARD committee. So even if they want to just be on the preparation side of the ARD meeting, but they can't make it to the actual meeting itself, being sure that their voice is heard somehow in that ARD meeting. So you just get a sense of, these are all things to consider. And then another section that gets repeated is spotlight on supports. In this case, we're going to meet the TED. And the TED is, I noticed as we entered today, we have several TEDs who are in the webinar with us today. And the TED is the Transition and Employment Designee. So that is every school district or charter school in Texas is required to have someone designated as the point person for questions about transition planning. So if you are a student or a family with a student or somebody who is interested in transition planning, which likely you are if you're here listening to me today, you want to know who is the TED for your district or your charter school. And so you can see on this next page, now bear with me, hear me out. You find the TED for your district in Ask TED. This is a bit confusing because let me skip down to the bottom of the page. The TED that I'm talking about, the person, is the Transition and Employment Designee. Ask TED is the Texas Education Directory. And so you have the link here to go to the Ask TED website, which is where all of the personnel data, a lot of information, the education directory for every district and charter school and ESC or Education Service Center, all of that information is kept. And so this is where you would go to find the TED. And this gives you a step-by-step way of finding the TED for any district. So it gives you those steps. So I know it sounds a bit confusing. You find the TED in Ask TED, but it helps to know what those TEDs stand for. All right, now here is where we get a lot of great information. Every chapter, or the first 7 chapters that are on those critical transition topics, they each end with a helpful note-taking guide called Questions to Ask Your ARD Committee. And so if you were preparing for an ARD meeting where you're going to be talking about transition planning and you're thinking, I don't even know where to start, well, you might look at these questions to decide, would this help me to ask, well, where can I find transition planning in my IEP? Pardon me, the IEP software systems that different districts use are going to look different, right? So where do I find it in the IEP for my student? And what about the supports that I get now through special education that might be needed when I'm an adult? That's going to be an important conversation. Are there supports that I'm just getting now that maybe I won't need in adult life? Or are there things that I need to be thinking about that if I'm getting those supports now, I'm likely to need them in the future? So I need to be thinking about where I might get those supports. And what can I do now to make sure I have supports after I graduate who can help me complete those activities? What skills will I learn this year that I'll need in adulthood? What classes can I take to help me meet my goals? And am I eligible to continue receiving special education services after I finish my high school classes and assessments? Often we hear that special education, free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, is eligible through age 22, and yet there's a little bit more to that story. We want to find out, depending on the student's graduation option that they're pursuing, and depending on some certain factors, the student might FAPE eligibility, special education eligibility, might end as soon as they've met their credit and assessment requirements. And so that's an important conversation to have with an ARD committee to get a sense of, when will eligibility end? If we still need support, what's that going to look like? And then, of course, capturing any other questions that you have about talking with an ARD committee. So, so that kind of gives you a sense of one of the chapters, and I'm going to kind of sneak us into the next chapter. So here we go, new color, new icon. Now we're talking about my rights. And so here we have a whole chapter devoted to the transfer of rights at age 18. And so it just kind of talks through some examples of rights for adults and some examples of responsibilities. And then notice here, it asks the student to consider, will you want support to understand your options or make decisions or communicate your decisions about any of the following? So notice that we're breaking it out here into, is it that you need help to understand your options, to make the decisions, or to communicate your decisions, or all of the above? But we're really trying to be very mindful. The guide really tries to walk us through all of the pieces of decision making, right? So you see that modeled. And then we kind of consider all the places where decision making is really critical. And then if there's something we didn't capture in the guide, well, you can add that in there. And also there's room for the student to indicate, I'll make all my decisions on my own. I'm going to be my own legal adult, and I'll ask for help in the same way that that anybody might ask for help, just informally. I'm not going to have any formal supports for making decisions. So that can be a really helpful conversation. And then just, again, you see the same kind of flow in this chapter of, just kind of explaining a bit more about that, that topic. And so if you bear with me, I'm going to scroll very quickly to the end. And so we're going to go through. And so we see there's another chapter on careers. We see more of the same kinds of things. I'm scrolling quickly just so that you can kind of get a sense. You see more student stories, you see more questions to ask your art committee, see more of those topics. So getting a sense, this is all the same. We talk about financial support, health. We have a whole chapter on healthcare transition, really critical. And now the last two chapters break that kind of format. So now we're into the next steps chapter. So there's next steps and assistance. Those don't follow the same format. So this one really answers the question, what should we do now to prepare for adult life and where should we start? So this one outlines skills, which are things to learn, or activities, which are things to do. And so it breaks it out by current age, and it gives students or families a chance to indicate whether that's something that they've already taken care of, if it's something that they're still working on or they're hoping to work on soon, or if it's just something that won't be needed, that it's not something that is an area that they need support or just not needed for them. So we have those ways of breaking that out. And so we see here that we break it into from early childhood into elementary. And then we see that here the skills are going to be student-led as appropriate. And then we move into middle school where it's going to be student-led with support as needed. And then we move into high school, student-led with support as needed. And notice the list gets longer, right? So if you are supporting a student in high school, you might want to go back and look at some of the things that you may have already done and check those off. That might feel good, but it's also kind of good to see that, the list gets longer the closer we get to graduation and exit. And then we have after you graduate, 18 to 22. And then we also acknowledge that sometimes things don't go exactly as planned. So there's a list of places to go for certain concerns. If for a student who got all the way into adulthood and then things just kind of took a turn, that it's transition planning really never ends, right? At least for me, it has never ended. I'm always in my adult life, I have always had to respond to changes, right? So that is kind of an acknowledgement of that and specific supports if you have a disability. And then the last section is assistance, which talks about places to go for help. Now you might recognize Partners Resource Network right there. So, and it divides these into transition planning in the IEP, and we have some local, state, and national resources. And here we have the legal rights. So you go back in through those topics. So, so just kind of wanted to highlight that and walk you through how the guide works and how you might access the guide. It's really designed to be something that you could access a single page or the entire thing. And if you have questions about the guide, notice that you have these ESC, Education Service Center contacts. So as we entered today, we saw the contact information we saw the people kind of logging in saying, hi, I'm from Region 1 or I'm from Region 19. And so here you see, if you have further questions, you might want to reach out to your ESC contact for transition. And I do just want to highlight one further resource for families. So if we go into early childhood, this is a late breaking resource. This is called The Next Steps to Independence, Skills and Strategies. And I'm going to highlight this for several reasons. This is really zeroing in on self-determination, increasing independence. And so notice that we start here with birth to age 3. And so here we have a list of skills. What can the child do for choice making and decision making, for goal setting and independence, self-management and self-awareness, self-determination and self-advocacy. So if you remember My Life, My Voice, self-determination in that topic, well, this is really like a much more expanded version of that with lots of considerations and lots of things to think about. And when we think about that by age band, so we've got birth to age 3, and again, much like the next steps checklist in the guide, you can indicate whether this is complete, in process, or not needed. And then the second page of that same age band, we have important action steps for families, and then we have some teaching and learning strategies. And this is great for families or professionals. So here are some great ideas for teaching these important skills in the home, in the community, in the classroom. So lots of great ways to kind of think about that. And now here we see age 3 to 5. So this is broken up by more specific age band. And then here we have elementary school. So you see that it follows that younger. Here we are into middle school, what the student might be expected to be able to do. And then we have high school. And then 18 plus, or ages 18 to 22. So, so with that, I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to check in to see if there were any questions that need to be addressed before we close out for today. But that's really the highlight that I wanted to share with you today: the transition an employment guide and the next steps checklist.
Thank you, Elizabeth. There was one question. Someone asked, Marty, how can we use this transition guide with our CASA kids who have suffered trauma, abuse, and/or neglect from family and may have a limited support system?
Great question. Absolutely. This might be something that is used in tandem with some other resources on maybe foster care resources or any kinds of supports that you have through Department of Family Protective Services, or that might be something that's used in tandem with, or it might be something. So like if we look at the transition guide, there's a student story in there of a student who was raised in foster care and who talks about his experience of navigating those systems and some of his frustrations with getting caught in between those systems. And it's shared as an example of exactly that kind of thing. Every student's story is unique. So you might want to go through the student stories, and also you might want to review the 24-minute video that's posted to the website right at the top of the page where the guide is. You might want to review that video because that student who's in foster care is used as an example of how one might use the guide with the student for educators. So it's just one of many examples, but it really, that's a great question because it goes to show that every student's story is unique, and certainly every year we have a whole new student. Because every day, these young people are reinventing themselves, they're growing, they're learning, they're changing. And so we're always going to kind of meet the student where they are. And so you might use specific pieces from the guide, or you might use that in connection with some other resources that will support each student. Great question.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think that was our key question. We had some other individuals ask where they could find those resources. And so we dropped those in the chat, and any of the other resources that Elizabeth has shared today are available on the Student Centered Transitions Network website. So Sarah, can you go ahead and just drop the link there to that site?
I will. There was one other question in the Q&A that I thought was a great question. So I want to run that by you. And that is, if there is someone in the school who would necessarily be going through this guidebook with a student, or if this is something the student really needs to kind of initiate on their own. And one of the reasons that they were asking that question is because sometimes students are a little resistant to parents giving them these ideas, but maybe more apt to accept it from someone at school.
That's a great question. So the requirement is that school districts share information about the guide, and on request a copy of the guide to families or students who request it. So you might look in your IEP or in your student's IEP to see if there's information about accessing the guide. You can also reach out to the TED, and certainly if you're encountering a teenager who is resistant to information, receiving information from either their parent or any particular individual, that you are not alone in this. But maybe reaching out to the TED to talk about ways that might be best shared. Who would be helpful for reviewing that, and kind of going through that, maybe having conversations with the school about the questions to ask the art committee or the self-determination, and just having conversations about how can we best include the student in these conversations, and where are they today? What are they ready for today, and where are we hoping they'll be ready soon?
Elizabeth, one last question.
Mhm.
Is there a guide that is more appropriate for students who are eligible as a student with an intellectual disability and have second to third grade reading levels?
Right at this point, this guide is available to be adapted. I know that there might be some individuals out there who have taken that and adapted it somewhat. And I think, again, in the video overview, there's an example of adapting the information in the guide. It's not a resource to be shared, but there's just an example discussion of a teacher who takes the information from the guide and adapts it for the students that they serve.
Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate you, Elizabeth, for joining us on today. And we have put the link to the texastransition.org website in the chat, where you can find the valuable resources reviewed today, as well as a plethora of more resources that would be of benefit. We are going to now transition to our final slides for today. And we will turn it back over to Stephanie McLaughlin with Partners Resource Network to begin to close us out.
Thank you, Gracie. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that information and wonderful resources available. Thank you all for joining us today. I just want to remind you the Partners Resource Network is a free resource to parents. We provide information, training, and support to parents of children with disabilities from birth to age 26 and youth self-advocates between the ages of 14 and 26. In the chat box, I'll put our contact information. You can check out our website at prntexas.org. You can give us a call if you have questions, or email us, and you can like and follow us on Facebook, also at PRN Texas. Thank you so much.
And again, we are SpedTex, the Special Education Information Center. Our contact information is on the screen. You can also find additional resources and contact us via phone, live chat with an expert at www.spedtex.org. Our site is available in English and Spanish. And at this juncture, we are just going to say thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you, and the recording of this webinar will be made available after it is made accessible on the SpedTex website on our Learn page. Thank you so much, and we hope y'all have a great rest of your day.